I want to tell you a story of the first anarchist. At least, I think he was one of the first anarchists in recorded history. And by anarchist, I mean someone who does not believe in the authority of political institutions or government by force, but someone who prefers voluntary cooperation. If you think you know who the first anarchist was, let me know in the comments. First, I'm going to talk about Daoism and how it relates to individualism and anarchism. I'm not an expert, and I don't think Daoism is a perfect way of life, but there are some lessons in the philosophy that are interesting and maybe worth considering. As someone who wants to manage my life, it's sometimes helpful to keep in mind that I cannot control everything, and sometimes it's best to let go. For context, Daoism came up around the 5th century BC in what we now call China, which at the time was a bunch of small states, often at war with each other. While some elements of Daoism may have come from simple prehistoric ways of life, the formal organization of Daoism seems to have been a reaction against the dominant form of Confucianism that rose along with the states in their consolidation. As I understand it, Confucius emphasized rigid rituals, social order, and subservience to philosopher bureaucrats. Confucianism is some kind of religious statism. Confucianism emphasizes the greater good for society. On the other hand, Daoism emphasizes individual happiness. Daoism also emphasizes nature, spontaneity, simplicity, detachment from desire, and inaction, or effortless action. One of the key concepts is balance, as illustrated by the yin-yang symbol. The Tao is the way. They say the Tao cannot be described, but it's something like the natural flow of being. I feel like I've experienced it sometimes, in a way, like in sports or music or other activities, when you get really focused in the moment and just kind of flow along with it. There's a video of Bruce Lee explaining,
So empty your mind. Be formless, shapeless, like water. Now you put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. You put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. You put it in a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Now water can flow or it can crash. Be water, my friend.
I think it's actually kind of hard to be effortless. I want to control my life, but some of it is beyond my control, and I have to accept that which I cannot control. Anyway, that's something that I struggle with. Now I'll try to summarize some principles of Daoism. One is, don't force anything. When we force, we push against the natural flow of the universe. In some cases, pushing hard can produce results. However, there are natural laws that we should take into account, and it's best to work with nature instead of against it. Another is, don't overburden yourself. There needs to be balance between action and inaction. The effort we put into things and the time we need to recover energy. Trying too hard can be counterproductive. Another, stop controlling the world. Many problems end up solving themselves. In some cases, today's problems become tomorrow's blessings. In many cases, intervention causes more problems. There are limitations to what we can control, and sometimes it's best to let go of control. Another point, enough is enough. Don't take more than we need. Too much of a good thing can be harmful. Don't become slaves to our possessions. The future is uncertain, and we can die tomorrow, having wasted much of our life in pursuit of more, rather than enjoying what we have. Another point, don't cling to life. Enjoy life and celebrate it, but don't cling to life desperately in fear of death. If we constantly fear death, we may see it around every corner, and our fear of death may hasten its arrival. Understand and accept that death will come in due time. Meanwhile, try to live a life worth living. So that's my basic interpretation and understanding of Daoism, and credit to Einzelgänger for much of that summary. There's a YouTube channel and a website that I'll link in the description. You can check it out for more. I'd like to expand on that and talk about the history of Daoism and Daoist principles in regard to government and statism. Statism being the belief that the state or the government is supreme and rules over the individual. First of all, the character of Lao Tzu. Lao Tzu was an official scholar of the royal court who became disillusioned by increasing moral corruption of government. Eventually, he left and wrote the Tao Te Ching, which is the foundational book of Daoism. To the individualist Lao Tzu, government, with its laws and regulations more numerous than the hairs of an ox, was a vicious suppressor of the individual and more to be feared than fierce tigers. According to Lao Tzu, the wisest course is to keep the government minimal and for it to take no action, for then the world stabilizes itself. As Lao Tzu put it, therefore the sage says, I take no action yet the people transform themselves. I am fond of stillness, yet the people correct themselves. I take no action, and the people enrich themselves. So Lao Tzu considered inaction to be the proper form of government, since only inaction could permit the individual to flourish and achieve happiness. Any intervention by government, Lao Tzu declared, would be counterproductive and would lead to confusion and turmoil. The more artificial taboos and restrictions there are in the world, the more the people are impoverished. The more the laws and regulations are given prominence, the more thieves and robbers there will be. Lao Tzu arrived at his radical insights, challenging the status quo in a world dominated by the power of Oriental despotism. It may have been unthinkable for Lao Tzu, with no examples of libertarian social change, to come up with an optimistic strategy, let alone contemplate forming a mass movement to overthrow the state. So, it is written that Lao Tzu fled the state and disappeared. Contemporary Daoists advocate retreat from the world as a matter of religious or ideological principle. But it's possible that Lao Tzu called for retreat, not as a matter of principle, but as the only strategy that seemed possible to him in his despair. It was hopeless to try to disentangle society from the oppressive coils of the state. Then perhaps he assumed that the proper course was withdrawal from society and the world as the only way to escape state tyranny. Now another character of Daoism, another progression to the next level, Zhuangzi. That retreat from the state was a dominant Taoist perspective may be seen in the views of the great Daoist Zhuangzi, who 2 centuries after Lao Tzu pushed the master's ideas of laissez-faire to their logical conclusion, individualist anarchism. Zhuangzi was a notable philosopher who wrote in allegorical parables. Zhuang's fame spread throughout China, so much so that King Wei of the Chu kingdom sent an emissary bearing great gifts and urging him to become chief minister of the state. Zhuangzi's scornful rejection of the king's offer is one of the great declarations in history on the evils underlying the glittering trappings of state power. He said, 1,000 measures of gold is a substantial profit, and a prime ministership is an exalted position indeed. But haven't you heard about the ox offered in the official sacrifice? He is generously fed for years and dressed in the finest embroidered fabrics, so that one day he may be led into the great temple for slaughter. When that day comes, though he may wish that he were just a little orphan piglet instead, it is too late. So scram, you, do not defile me. I'd rather enjoy myself wallowing in the filth than let me be ruled by some head of state. I'd rather remain without official position to the end of my days, enjoying myself whichever way I may wish. Zhuangzi reiterated and embellished Lao Tzu's devotion to laissez-faire and opposition to state rule. He said, "There has been such a thing as letting mankind alone. There has never been such a thing as governing mankind with success. The world simply does not need to be governed. In fact, it should not be governed." Zhuangzi was perhaps the first theorist to work out the idea of spontaneous order, developed particularly by Proudhon in the 19th century, and also by Friedrich Hayek of the Austrian school in the 20th century. Basically, good order results spontaneously when things are let alone. Zhuangzi was one of the first to see the state as a brigand writ large. A petty thief is put in jail. A great brigand becomes a ruler of state. Thus, the only difference between state rulers and out-and-out robber chieftains is the size of their depredations. Zhuangzi was then perhaps the world's first anarchist. I learned a lot of that from Murray Rothbard. Some of it I quoted almost word for word from an article he wrote in the Journal of Libertarian Studies. There's also a great audio version of that, read by Jeff Riggenbach, and I'll put links to both of those, written and audio, in the description. There are some other interesting writings that are attributed to Zhuangzi, different translations too, and if you want to read some, I'll recommend Brook Ziporyn's translation, and I'll put a link to that as well. They're sort of parables and weird stories, some of them thought experiments. One of the most famous is the story of the butterfly, that Zhuangzi was taking a nap, dreaming of being a butterfly, and when he awoke, he wondered if he was a man dreaming of being a butterfly, or a butterfly dreaming of being a man. Anyway, just kind of a trip. That's all too much to get into now for the sake of this video, but I just want to give you an overview of some of my understanding of Daoism and Laozi and Zhuangzi, and how it relates to individualism and anarchism, in my opinion. Till next time,